Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Here we go. So how to design scalable campus networks. Now, keep in mind, this is a subset of the CCNP ENSLD blueprint. Today, we're going to cover a lot of the layer 2 campus design options and really the technology that goes into the campus side of things. Again, feel free to ask questions as you have them. Here's our agenda. Now, this is a loose agenda, right? We're going to do design campus layer 2. It's requesting to annotate the shared content. I don't know if I'm going to allow this request, so someone just requested to annotate the shared content. If you have questions or you want me to go into something, please just let me know. I'm going to go ahead and decline that. I just don't know what you were looking to do there. So yeah, this is the agenda, design campus layer 2 infrastructures, and then we're going to go into the kind of design campus network for high availability. Now that high availability is specific to kind of a layer 2 architecture, just so you're aware. We're not going to get into necessarily the layer 3 routing high availability and kind of traffic engineering, but we will in the future, just not in this session. And then at the end, we're going to do kind of a layer 2 design campus use case. Like, what are the things from a campus perspective that you should keep in your mind as you're designing kind of the campus structure with all the different technologies there? And that, before I dive in, that section right there, from a design perspective, is really the first time any designer is faced with multiple technologies they have to design for. All right, so we're going to talk about individual technologies in the first 2 agenda items, and then when we get to that 3rd agenda item, we're going to talk about kind of overlaying technologies together. That's really what a designer does. That's really what we do as network designers. All right, so that's the agenda. Any questions so far?
No, go ahead.
All right, cool. So, right. So we're going to do some basic stuff here, and I hope that's okay because we got to talk about it, and there's some design implications here. So DTP and VTP, what are they? And I'm a very interactive person. I forgot to say that at the beginning. So the whole point here is, you know, we know this stuff, right? So we're going to ask questions. Do you guys know what dynamic trunking protocol is? And if you do, let me know. Hopefully you do, right?
Yeah, and maybe that's
so at a high level.
Yeah, I was going to say that, and that asks the design question. Why do we need the DTP? Why would we think to need dynamic trunking protocol? We don't need to know the what or how. Let's focus on the why.
Exactly. In like Mohammed's point, we are why guys, right? That's what we are. We are all about why here, not the how. All right, so in notes, in chat, we got Peter. He says trunks will be auto-negotiated between 2 interfaces instead of the static port mode assignments. We got Sami, I don't know if I pronounced your name right. Automatic management. Hussein's got configuration scalability of trunking links. Nice. So yes, we're going to automatically. So in the slides, I put automagically, right? DTP is going to negotiate those trunk links, right? So that's the why. Again, we don't care about the how right now, but that's the why. What about VTP? And maybe some of the comments in chat were for VTP as well. So Edson said, in the past, VTP was useful to create VLANs across a fleet of 100 switches or more. Yeah, so think that in scale, right?
Propagates VLAN information.
Exactly, Ethan, right? Exactly.
Over multiple switches.
And Peter added, creates a synced database that is shared between switches, right? Now, were there any issues with VTP? Does anyone know? Anyone run into any VTP issues in the past?
VTP, I believe, should be a protocol to propagate VLANs on switches.
Yeah, so I got a couple people in chat too said that blows up your L2 or layer 2, insert new switches, be careful. Revision number issues when I brought in an old switch when I started way back when. Can you erase the VLAN? So the whole point that I was trying to make there is that, yes, right, VTP is going to solve some issues, but it also creates other issues, right? So VTP is going to let you propagate VLANs across your layer 2 environment, right? So if you have 50 switches, 1,000 switches, you can propagate those VLANs. The problem is that if you bring in a new switch that has a higher revision number, it's going to potentially erase your VLAN database. And the implication there is that you're going to not have any VLANs on all those switches. and then all your devices are going to go offline. So it's a pretty big failure domain, problem. But that's the whole point, right? It's used to propagate VLANs among switches. Mohammed, did you have anything you wanted to add here?
No, I agree. A couple of friends here mentioned that currently maybe VPP is something like that is not recommended. Now, like with when you design your campus switches, many people say like you don't have like this end-to-end or span VLAN. As example, VLAN 10 is available in 100 places all over your campus. If you can try to limit the VLAN spanning to maybe at least a switch, or if it requires maybe just a couple of switches, then you have more control, and then you will not need this kind of protocol to propagate VLANs among the switches. Just configure it once, control it, and because each switch has its own VLAN dedicated to it. So like by time it's like technology changes and requirements changes. So maybe some of these old protocols are not really recommended in each and every deployment. As you know, that's like the magic answer for each and every design. It depends. So depends on the requirement. Maybe you still need it, but I believe if you have the possibility and building a green network and you want to control it better, maybe try to minimize the span of the VLAN among multiple switches.
No, exactly. And real quick, Mohammed, your audio sounds perfect now, just so you're aware. Maybe it was because of video too. But your audio is right on point.
I remember from
believe,
one of your.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say not to expand SDP, like your example of the issue you experienced with your DCs previously.
Yeah, 100%. So there just some basic stuff, right? VTP has some different modes, right? Just in case you didn't know, which I'm sure everyone probably did know at this point: client, server, transparent. And we'll get into some design considerations for both VTP and DTP in a minute. We already kind of touched base on the VTP device with the highest config rev is the keeper of the database, right? It's the master of the database, right? So really what I want to get here is what are the design considerations? Go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, I just want to find out the difference between VTP version 2 and version 3.
Yeah, and actually I'm going to get into that in a minute, just a little bit, right? When I get down to the VTP consideration. So if you could just hold off for about a minute, and we should cover it. And if we don't answer that question, just let me know. All right? Did that help?
Okay, cool.
Keep going. So DTP considerations, right? So it's actually recommended to manually configure your trunks, and access switches. So and disable DTP. Now, again, we're not going into how, right? But from a design perspective, it's recommended to do this manually so you don't have other devices connected to your switches that become trunks. Does that make sense? Everyone tracking with that? That's kind of a DTP consideration. Now, the VTP considerations here, if your network only supports version 2, right? And this is the underlying issue with version 2, don't use it. Just don't use it, right? Do manual VLAN configurations on your switches. I know it's a little bit more manual, maybe more tedious, right? But a lot of us have done this over the years. You can do templated configurations and push them down. You can do them with template configurations and like obviously a text file, or you could even do it with some sort of automation tool, et cetera. But use if there's VTP version 2, don't use it is the key. Configure all your switches in transparent mode. Right, so if it's in transparent mode, they don't pass the VLAN information between the switches. You have to actually go in and configure it yourselves, and it kind of negates the VTP domain and the VTP revision number. They're not valid. They're not compared between the switches. And then if you want to use VTP, use version 3. Right, so version 3 has additional features, functionality, capabilities to limit. Actually to stop the issues that they have with VTP version 2. Now, there is something to talk about, though. If you're going to use version 3, keep in mind that most of the devices out there have a default version of version 2. So don't assume that your switch is going to support version 3 right away. You have to go in and change the configuration to version 3. And then also, VTP version 3 is not compatible with private and extended VLANs running within VTP version 2. Those are the key things, right? I don't want to harp on DTP and VTP too long, but those are just some key recommendations from a design perspective, design consideration. And I'm going to punt it to Mohammed to make sure I didn't miss anything.
Yeah, it's brilliant, Zig. You covered it all. But I believe one of the comments from Magnus, when you talked about like maybe we can configure the VLANs with automation. I believe yes, we can easily maybe write an Ansible playbook or even using Cisco NSO or any of these tools. But as you mentioned, that automation is something great, but also like you can do the things very fast, but you can also fail fast, or maybe the effect will be heuristic. I mean, so with the automation, you need to make sure about like doing some validation, making sure you're not before touching the network, like doing it on the validation lab or something like that, or dry run. Just to reply to Magnus' comment on the chat.
And I'm wondering if Magnus's command there is more about like DTP and VTP are ways to automate things before we actually brought in like DevOps and Python and Ansible, et cetera. I think it's more of like DTP and VTP and potentially were the automation solutions, but they add some security vulnerabilities or potential security risk to our architectures, our designs. And so that's why we're, obviously we're suggesting here to disable both, right? But if you're adding DevNet, DevOps, whatever automation programmability, that's a different ballpark, right? Because you're adding that and you're still not configuring DTP or VTP. You're just adding automation to configure your VLANs and your trunks for you.
Exactly.
But isn't it that the value of these protocols, since we all learn now Python and do our DevNet association at least, is removed a little bit? Because looking at VTP, it was just about designed as manageability of switch-to-switch communication in campus networks and stuff like this. Yeah, so that was really the value, because in the past you cannot do everything on Linux also before, yeah, but nobody was able to do it directly if you don't have a friend who helps you with that one. Yeah? So I think the value is a little bit removed on that once, yeah, because now everybody is.
That's a great point.
So we're looking at the history of a protocol. Sometimes makes sense to understand what the goal was there, why it was developed, and looking to reflect it into these days, as we all did these cool Python stuff right now. And personally, I think if my automation suite is working, and of course you need to do regression and all these careful, but you do the same if you implement VTP, you also do regression testing and do it in your lab and all this stuff to be super secure before rolling out the configuration by a tool. Yeah, so I think sometimes the value is a little bit of removed, because personally I don't see any reason to do it right now. There's no good.
I agree 100%. That's a great point. Is that this was more before we had DevOps and DevNet and automation and programmability, and now that we have that, do we really need to care that much about DTP and VTP from our perspective? We're just going to have some sort of automation workflow that does this for us, right? And make sure and validates what's configured. And I think this is going to go into a lot of these things that we're going to talk about too. The next topic is VLAN pruning, because I think from a design perspective, before we even had automation, we had to manually prune everything, right? Like there's VLAN pruning. If you configure automatically, it doesn't actually remove your spanning tree instances, right? And I know we're jumping here a little bit, but there's an implication here from a design standpoint that if you do VLAN pruning natively with it actually enabling it, right, it doesn't remove your spanning tree instances. So we've always done manual pruning of VLANs on the trunk links, right? If you're familiar with the switch port mode, switch port mode trunk, switch port trunk mode, whatever it is, VLAN allow, right? I think I have it here somewhere. There, the switch port trunk allow VLAN command, right? We're going to limit what we're allowing between the switches. Well, now we can automatically do that as well with DevOps and automation and programmability, and also even further than that, like whatever controllers are in play too in the environment. And we don't have to worry about these commands anymore. The controller and the automation plugins are going to just do it natively.
100%. I just want to add here, Zig, when Chris talk and when you talk as well, I start to remember the old days, maybe 20 years back or 15 years back, when we used to work on configuring switches and how it was like very hard to do like a mistake, like this command switch trunk allow VLAN, and then you don't copy all the VLAN on the trunk and just put the new one, and then you figure out that everything like erased from the trunk, and then Cisco, I believe, added allow VLAN add, and you just add a specific VLAN. Another point also, like for VTP from the like real life experience, I believe long time back people used to have this VTP like a way of, as Chris mentioned, as a way of to simplify management. If I have a new switch on the network, I just configure it as a client and push all the VLANs to it from a server, and then just switch off VTP again. So I believe some people are using it like a way to onboard a new switch and make the configuration easier, something like to copy and paste to the other switch. So it's a tool, and then you decide based on your situation how to use it and what is the best way to use it, like a knife. Shall you do it to cut something or do it to kill somebody? Yeah. Kill your network.
Well, it's a tool, right? It's a tool.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
some tools are better used in certain situations, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I think this is beneficial here because what you just said is critical, right? I don't know. I've been in that situation where we did switch port trunk allow VLAN and we forgot the add command, right? Like I think most of us can relate to that. Forget the add command and we bring down the whole network or that switch, or there's an outage because we forgot the add command.
Yeah, and super hard when you come to CutOS in the old days, yeah. And CutOS is completely differently from the command set, yeah. So never put something wrongly there, and so a lot of error prone situations there, yeah. So but basically what has happened is always it's nothing completely brand new, I would say, yeah, because Cisco Works does it in 2002 already, yeah. And I think I borrowed Mohammed my CDs, yeah. Can I get it back so I can reinstall Cisco Works? It does all the automation already 18 years ago. Yeah. So nothing brand new. Quick, it comes just in a different style, always in network technology.
Yeah. Cisco Works was awesome back in the day, right? It was like the beginning of everything. Real quick, Dennis